Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a reading wrap-up. I'm combining July and August here. So the first book that I'd like to talk about is Skyward, and it's on the shelf behind me. This was a reread for me. I gave it 5 stars. I adored it. I have a separate review for this, and all of the books in this wrap-up that I have other content for, I will link all in the description below so you can go and check it out. But this is about Spencer. She wants to become a pilot. She's living on a planet called Detritus, and her planet is fighting against what are called the Krell, effectively these aliens that want to keep all the people on Detritus and they stop them from escaping. So while they're fighting against these aliens, there is this massive cultural shift of people believing in courage and shunning cowardice. And so naturally, Spencer's father used to be in the pilot force, but he abandoned his crew and then was labelled a coward. So Spencer is therefore fighting against this label. It follows her trying to become a pilot throughout this story, and it follows the dynamic of her, some world building and some alien forces and politics that come into it at the same time. I don't want to get further into it, but I obviously really loved it. This was a reread, like I said, and I gave it 5 stars, and it was well worth the reread. And I actually reread Starsight recently as well, and I really adored that too. So if you can get your hands on Skyward, I love Brandon Sanderson, so I'm always going to recommend his books. But if you can give Skyward a try, it is a young adult sci-fi and it is well worth the time. I loved particularly in this that Brandon Sanderson could have gone down the road of the girl versus girl for no reason trope, where you can easily build up characters by fighting them against each other, but he didn't go down that road, and that's just one of the little pieces of respect that I have for him that showed in this book, and it is ultimately why I continued reading it and I reread it, because I really like all of the characters and dynamics that come from this, and so I wanted to revisit it and refresh my memory in time for the 3rd book coming out this year. Plus there are also some Skyward novellas coming out, so I think there are 3 of them, and I think they're coming out before Cytonic, the 3rd book, so I have a lot of Skyward content to look forward to in the near future, and I'm very excited for all of it. And I gave this 5 stars, like I said. Please read it if you can. And now it is finally time. I can finally include this book in a wrap-up. It is The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. This is the 2nd Wheel of Time book. I have a separate review and a spoiler vlog for this if you want to see all of my thoughts as I read this book. I gave this a 2 stars out of 5. The first book in this series I gave a 4 stars, and so I thought naturally I'm going to really enjoy this one as well. But if you have been on my channel for a while, you know that I've been reading this since February, so it has taken me a considerably long time to finish, but I finally got there. This has a quest in its center. The character Rand, he's like the main chosen one kind of character. He's going on a quest to find the horn, which is what the Great Hunt essentially entails. He also has a friend in this book that has a particular link to a magical artifact, and so they're trying to establish a way to destroy that as well and therefore sever the connection. So there are magical artifacts in here, there is a quest, there are a crew of characters that kind of split off and come back together at different points in the story. So I thought my interest would be renewed at each different character that I experienced. However, because we are seeing from inside Rand's head, I found him very deliberately frustrating, because this book really relied on a lot of miscommunication in order to push the story forward, and it felt like it really stalled you in terms of pacing and pushing the characterization and progress forward, especially environmentally. I found that they were in similar places quite a lot when you felt like they should be progressed further than that, and I think that is a fallback of Robert Jordan's writing. I've heard that he uses miscommunication quite significantly, and the paces of his work really suffers for that. So going forward and reading the 3rd book is not something that I envision myself doing, at least in the near future. I don't know if I might just become really dumb and then pick up the 3rd book and see what I like about it, but we'll see how that goes. At the moment, I'm not continuing the series. In the future Beck might try and pick up the next book, but I don't like her chances, so I'm just going to leave it here for now. I do want to try the 3rd book to see if it actually falls on the side of a 2 stars or a 4 stars. Maybe it'll fall middle of the road on a 3 stars, but if the story keeps going up and down, honestly, I don't see the value in continuing reading it. I think personally my tastes have probably grown past this series, and if I discovered it way earlier on when I was first getting into fantasy, I think I might have liked it, because this has a lot of the key tropes that a lot of fantasy pivots on now, but I find that a lot of the modern fantasy that I read really juggles and handles and subverts these tropes very well and doesn't rely on stretching things out as much as this series does. So Wheel of Time is a bit iffy, and it's kind of in the naughty corner for me at the moment, but I'm really glad that I finished this. Unfortunately, like I said, I only gave it 2 stars, but I gave it a go at least. And then after this, I also finished Side Jobs by Jim Butcher. This is the 12.5 installment in the Dresden Files, and I have a separate review for that as well, which includes spoilers and spoiler-free sections of the video. So go and check that out for more thoughts, because obviously I don't spoil anything during a wrap-up. So that follows Harry Dresden. I've talked about him before. He's a wizard detective in Chicago. He helps solve supernatural crimes and murders. There are lots of different political elements coming into play now with the White Council of Wizards, the vampire courts, and Harry and his magic in general with all his friends. So I really like how that is starting to eventuate and unravel, but this one in particular is a set of novellas. So it takes place from before the first book to all the way to the 12th book, about an hour after the 12th book events occur. And so I liked seeing all of the different characters again that I've got to experience throughout the entire series. I found that very fulfilling and enlightening because it touches on different points and just really added to the main story. And I find that if I'm reading a set of novellas, that's what I expect them to do. I expect them to add more detail and meaning and character onto what already exists. So that's where this story selection really delivered. I did like Aftermath the best. So if you've read the Dresden Files and you know which one Aftermath is, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I adored that story. But that's my spoiler-free thoughts of Side Jobs. I can't really elaborate more in this video, but I gave it a 4.5 stars, I believe. Not my favorite of Dresden so far, but it was still really good. And I'm not someone who really likes short story collections, so I think a 4.5 stars is pretty stellar. I also listened to an audiobook by Becky Chambers, and this is another novella, but it's the first in a novella series. And I expected to give this a 4 or 5 stars. It is a psalm for the wild built, and it follows a character named Dex, and they are a non-binary tea monk, and so they essentially travel around with their tea van and go to different towns, and tea monks are very highly revered. You basically come to one with all of your problems and they listen. It's kind of like psychology, but also that personal emotional touch and the comfort of drinking tea that very much suits your particular situation. It's very lovely and wholesome and connective, and that's why I read Becky Chambers books, because she has that talent of being able to tap into that emotion and just put it on the page. And so this story follows Dex the tea monk, like I said, and they just don't feel fulfilled in their current life. They want to deviate from it somehow, but they're not sure how. And also, robots used to exist in this society, but they haven't been there for about 100 years. They just all up and decided one day to not serve humans anymore, and they disappeared. So this follows Dex, who encounters a robot for the very first time. And that's where the story goes, essentially, with these two different cultures meeting together and having lots of questions on the basis of that. And I like again how Becky Chambers combines cultural questions with identity. She does that very well. So while I like the themes in here and the general story, it felt very slow to me, and it felt like it was only just starting to get going. I think if this was novel length and it had more things in it, I would be more invested, but I only gave this a 3 stars. I really enjoyed it and I will continue, but it just didn't do it entirely for me, unfortunately. Up next, I thought, you know what, I need to actually get my act together and read some more stuff. So I thought, why not chuck a comic onto my TBR so that I can read some things really quickly and kind of bolster my numbers. Turned out it backfired, and that wasn't a good idea at all. And I read the first volume of Bitch Planet, and this is about a group of women, I think, who are forced to participate in some kind of game, but when they're not in this game, they're kept in a camp or a prison or something. So it's supposed to really tease out that sense of oppression and fighting against power, and also feminism in a way as well. But the way that it handled the themes and the way that the characters were represented in here, I just didn't connect to their personalities, I didn't connect to their camaraderie, and I didn't connect to ultimately the themes and how they were being conveyed. And I don't think the art style was really for me as well. So I got to the end of this and I just felt very frustrated. I was skim reading it, I was skipping over things, I just didn't care and I didn't connect. So I gave it a 2 stars. Probably other people really enjoy this, but it just really wasn't for me. And I have the second volume as well, and it looks like I'm just going to unhaul them, because unfortunately I bought these on sale when I saw them once in a bookstore and I thought they would be amazing, but they're just, honestly, they're not my thing, and I thought they would be. So I'm a little bit disappointed. Actually, I'm a lot disappointed that I didn't get into these, but you win some, you lose some, and I just happened to lose this one. And now the last 2 books I also have separate reviews for, which I will link below. The next one is an audiobook, and this took me about a month to listen to, and it is Luxe by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 4th installment in his Reckoners series, so that is an urban fantasy / dystopian work, and it's a trilogy that starts out with Steelheart, and there is a little novella in there called Mitosis. That set of books follows our main character named David, and he witnesses his father being killed by an epic named Steelheart, and so a big event called Calamity, a massive star, comes to Earth and blesses people with supernatural abilities, but when these people get these abilities, it also heightens their sense of sociopathy and narcissism. And so when they get these abilities, they turn into villains. So it's a story about humans rebelling and fighting against these epics. And ultimately, David wants to take revenge for his father's death and kill Steelheart. But Steelheart is the equivalent of like a Superman. So what is his weakness? How do they kill him? How can they even get close to doing that? That is what Steelheart, the trilogy, follows. But when I listen to Luxe, that is a continuation novella, kind of like a spin-off in Texas, and it follows a different character named Jax. So Jax witnesses something tragic happening with his brother, and he's also trying to infiltrate this place called Luxe, which is a floating city in the sky. So he is his own kind of reckoner. He's a different faction, and he's got a different set of goals and a different mission. So I really liked seeing all of the characters in there. I found that they were very well developed. All of them had their own backstory shown to us, but in some cases I predicted some of the dynamics and some of the plot points. Not the ending. I didn't predict the ending, thankfully, but I predicted or saw a few things coming that structurally had to occur in order for ripple effects to happen. That is as spoiler free as I can keep it. I did discuss spoilers in my other videos, so again I'll link it below if you want to actually get more nitty gritty detail about what I thought. But I gave Luxe a 4 out of 5 stars. I wanted to give it a 4.5 or a 5 because generally I rate Brandon Sanderson pretty high because he's one of my favorite authors, but this one just didn't quite get there for me. While I enjoyed what it was doing and what it was setting up, it just felt very thick and chunky in terms of its pace, and so combined with my reading slump and the fact that it was an audiobook, I just felt that it was difficult for me to get through. But ultimately I finished it, I enjoyed it, I gave it a 4, I will continue, but it didn't quite reach the dizzy heights of a new favorite for me. I enjoyed it, and that's all I really wanted out of it. And then lastly on this list, I recently finished Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. I finished this in a recent reading vlog, and I reread this as well, like Skyward, in anticipation of the Skyward novellas as well as Cytonic coming out in November. Clearly it is a very anticipated release for me, but I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I did like Skyward a lot better, and I liked Skyward a lot better again on my reread, but I found that when I went into this book, and I won't say specifically what it's about because to talk about a sequel I have to talk about the ending of the first book, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but when I was reading this, it felt in some ways like it was rehashing certain things that occurred in Skyward, just in a bit of a different way to increase the depth of character that we understood. And so to build on that, it had to kind of do things again, but with a slightly different dynamic. So I felt that it was a bit of a repeat, but at the same time, when I was rereading it, I could see different kinds of detail and appreciate more of the depth and the characters that were being introduced. So while I found that in some cases it was rehashing, there were other things that I really enjoyed about this, and I did tear up at a particular point in here because of the way that Brandon Sanderson writes character and meaning and payoff, and he tends to do his endings quite well. So that is ultimately what I enjoyed about this the most. The middle to end, the first part felt like not a slog, but it felt like a little bit of work to get through because I felt like I'd already seen this kind of thing in Skyward. So with that said, I'm not going to say any more because I might accidentally spoil this, and I don't want to do that. I gave it 4. I really enjoyed it. I'm super excited for all of the Skyward, Starsight and Cytonic content coming out this year, but this is the last book in this particular wrap up. I'm on about 28 books read so far this year, which is okay, but I wish I'd been doing better. I'm also currently listening to the audiobook for Cold Days by Jim Butcher, and that is the 14th book in the Dresden Files, I think, and I'm currently reading King of Thorns, and I'm just over halfway through this. So those 2 books are going to be in my next wrap up, and I'm aiming to get them finished as soon as I can, hopefully before September starts to roll through, so keep your fingers crossed for me. But those are all the things that I've read recently. Thank you so much for watching this video. Come chat to me down below. Go and check out my other content if you feel so inclined, but again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.